The morning Margaret Thornton decided to confront a Special Forces veteran about his clothing choices would become the most catastrophic decision of her 8-year reign as HOA president of Willowbrook Estates, a decision that would unleash a reckoning she never saw coming. Follow my story to the end and comment which city you're watching from so I can see how far this incredible tale of justice has traveled. The California sun painted Willowbrook Estates in shades of gold that Tuesday morning, its rays catching the pristine lawns and symmetrical hedges that Margaret Thornton had spent 8 years perfecting. Every blade of grass stood at regulation height. Every mailbox matched the approved shade of forest green. Every driveway remained clear of oil stains, chalk drawings, and most importantly, any signs of individuality that might threaten the aesthetic harmony of her domain. Marcus Sullivan stood in his kitchen staring at the coffee maker as if it held the secrets of the universe. 3 days. He'd been home for 3 days and his hand still shook when he reached for his morning cup. The ceramic mug, a souvenir from Kandahar that had somehow survived 15 years and 4 deployments, felt alien in his grip. Everything felt alien. The silence, most of all. In Afghanistan, silence meant danger. Here in suburban California, it apparently meant peace. Marcus couldn't tell which one unsettled him more. He wore what he'd worn yesterday and the day before, camouflage cargo pants and a sand-colored tactical shirt. Not because he hadn't unpacked his civilian clothes, his sister Rachel had made sure his closet was fully stocked, but because the familiar fabric felt like armor against a world that suddenly seemed too bright, too clean, too normal. The knock came at 7:23 a.m., sharp, authoritative. 3 precise raps that echoed through the house like gunshots. Marcus's body reacted before his mind could process. His hand went to his hip, reaching for a sidearm that wasn't there. His breathing slowed, his muscles tensed. Then reality crashed back. He was in Willowbrook Estates, not Helmand Province. The biggest threat here was probably a door-to-door salesman. Rachel emerged from the hallway, still in her pajamas, her laptop tucked under one arm. She'd been living in the house for the past 2 years, keeping it maintained while Marcus finished what he'd promised would be his last deployment. At 32, she had their mother's sharp features and their father's stubborn streak, a combination that had served her well as a forensic accountant. "I'll get it," she said, noting the tension in Marcus's shoulders. "No." Marcus set down his coffee. "I've got it." The woman standing on his porch looked like she'd been assembled by a committee dedicated to the concept of suburban authority. Margaret Thornton, though Marcus didn't know her name yet, stood 5'6" in sensible heels. Her blonde hair sculpted into a helmet that could probably withstand hurricane-force winds. She wore a navy blazer with an HOA president pin that caught the morning light like a sheriff's badge. Her lips were painted in a shade of red that suggested blood or authority, possibly both. She held a clipboard against her chest like a shield and surveyed Marcus with the kind of disapproval typically reserved for war criminals or people who didn't separate their recycling. "Mr. Sullivan." It wasn't a question. She'd done her homework. "Yes." Marcus kept his voice neutral, a skill honed through countless interactions with hostile local leaders in places where the wrong word could start a firefight. "I'm Margaret Thornton, president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association." She paused, apparently expecting some form of recognition or perhaps genuflection. When neither came, her lips pursed tighter. "We need to discuss your repeated violations of our community's standards." Marcus blinked. "I've been home for 3 days." "Yes, and in those 3 days you've been observed wearing inappropriate attire in clear violation of our community guidelines." She thrust a folded paper at him with the efficiency of someone serving a subpoena. "This is your official notice." Rachel appeared at Marcus's shoulder, reading over his arm as he unfolded the paper. The letterhead was elaborate, featuring a stylized image of Willowbrook Estates that made the subdivision look like Versailles. Below it in officious typescript was a paragraph that would have been funny if it weren't so absurd. "Dear Mr. Sullivan, it has come to the attention of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association that you have been repeatedly observed wearing military camouflage attire in common areas of our community. This type of clothing is in direct violation of Section 7, Subsection 3A of our Community Aesthetic Standards, which prohibits aggressive, intimidating, or militaristic displays that may cause discomfort to residents or diminish property values. You are hereby notified that continued violations will result in fines of $250 per occurrence with potential escalation to legal action. You have 48 hours to comply. Respectfully, Margaret Thornton, HOA. President Rachel snorted. You've got to be kidding me. Margaret's eyes flashed. I assure you, Miss Sullivan, the HOA takes these matters very seriously. We've worked hard to maintain Willowbrook Estates as a premier community. We cannot allow disruptions. Disruptions? Marcus kept his voice level, but Rachel could hear the edge creeping in. It was the same tone he'd used in a recorded interrogation she'd once heard right before he'd gotten a Taliban commander to reveal an entire network. I'm wearing clothes. Military clothes, Margaret corrected, which many residents find intimidating. Which residents? Rachel demanded. Margaret's smile could have frosted glass. That's confidential, but I assure you there have been multiple complaints. Marcus studied the woman in front of him. In 15 years of service, he'd become an expert at reading people, their tells, their weaknesses, their pressure points. Margaret Thornton was wound tighter than piano wire, her entire identity wrapped up in the control she wielded over this little kingdom of suburban conformity. The wedding ring tan line on her finger was still visible, though no ring adorned it. Recent divorce, probably. The way she held herself rigid and defensive suggested someone who'd lost control of something important and was overcompensating by controlling everything else. Mrs. Thornton. Miss Thornton, she corrected sharply. Miss Thornton. Marcus continued. I'm a veteran. I just got back from my 5th deployment. These clothes, they're comfortable, familiar. They're not hurting anyone. They're hurting our property values, Margaret shot back. Families move to Willowbrook Estates for safety, for normalcy, not to be reminded of violence. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Rachel stepped forward. Violence, he served his country. He protected people like you so you could stand here and… Marcus put a hand on his sister's arm. It's fine, Rach. It's not fine. Rachel's face flushed. This is discrimination. It's probably illegal. Margaret's smile widened. I encourage you to review our HOA bylaws, Miss Sullivan. Every homeowner agreed to them when they purchased property here, your brother included. She checked her watch, a delicate gold piece that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. You have 48 hours to comply. Good day. She turned on her heel and clicked her way down the driveway, her posture suggesting she'd just won a major victory. Rachel slammed the door. That absolute… Leave it, Marcus said. Leave it, Marcus. She can't do this. You know she can't do this. Marcus walked back to the kitchen, picked up his coffee. It had gone cold. Everything in this house seemed to go cold too quickly. It doesn't matter. Of course it matters. Rachel followed him, her laptop still under her arm. You're going to fight this right. Marcus didn't answer. In truth, he didn't have the energy to fight anything. The simple act of getting out of bed each morning felt like a victory. The idea of battling some suburban dictator over his choice of pants seemed impossibly exhausting. But Rachel was already opening her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I'm looking up the HOA bylaws. There's got to be something we can use. Rach? No, don't you dare give up, not on this. She looked up at him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that made his chest tight. You've been giving up on everything since you got back. This we can fight. Marcus wanted to tell her that some fights weren't worth having, that after 15 years of real combat, a dispute over clothing seemed petty pointless. But he also knew that look. Rachel had worn it when she'd fought their high school principal over dress code discrimination, when she'd taken on a corrupt supervisor at her first accounting job, when she'd stood by Marcus's decision to re-enlist after their parents died, even though it meant she'd be alone. Fine, he said. Look into it. But I'm not changing what I wear. Rachel grinned. Wouldn't expect you to. 2 hours later, Rachel had transformed the dining room table into a research command center. Legal documents, printed emails, and highlighted HOA bylaws covered every surface. Her laptop was open to at least 15 tabs, and she'd consumed enough coffee to fuel a small army. This is insane, she muttered, scrolling through a document. Did you know they have regulations on bird feeder colors, and wind chimes are limited to soft, melodious tones not exceeding 45 decibels. Marcus sat across from her cleaning his father's old service pistol, not loaded, just the repetitive motion of maintenance that helped calm his nerves. Find anything useful? Maybe. Rachel pulled up another document. The bylaws do prohibit disruptive attire, but it's vaguely defined. The real question is whether they can legally enforce it against military clothing, especially when worn by a veteran. It's not about the law, Marcus said, running a cloth along the barrel. It's about control. Rachel looked up. What do you mean? People like Margaret Thornton, I've met them before. Different countries, same psychology. They need to control their environment because something in their life feels out of control. The rules aren't about making things better. They're about making her feel powerful. So what do we do? Marcus reassembled the pistol with practiced efficiency. We don't play by her rules. That afternoon, Marcus decided to test the waters. He put on his full combat uniform, digital camouflage, ACUs, tactical boots, patrol cap, the works. Not the dress uniform he wore for ceremonies, but the working uniform he'd worn on patrol. The one that still smelled faintly of Afghan dust, no matter how many times it had been washed. He walked out to check the mail. The street was quiet, typical for a Tuesday afternoon in Willowbrook Estates. Most residents were at work, leaving only retirees, stay-at-home parents, and the occasional work-from-home professional to witness his fashion rebellion. Mrs. Chen, watering her roses 3 houses down, did a double take. She was 73, a widow whose husband had served in Vietnam. After a moment's hesitation, she raised her hand in a small wave. Marcus waved back. Tom Henderson was washing his car in his driveway. A contractor in his 50s, built like someone who'd actually worked for a living rather than pushed papers. He studied Marcus for a moment, then called out, "Welcome home, soldier." "Thank you, sir." "Marines," Tom corrected with a grin. "1st Battalion, 9th Marines, 72 to 76. 101st Airborne," Marcus replied. "Then Special Forces." Tom whistled. "The real deal, then. You need anything, you let me know. Appreciate it." But not everyone was supportive. Across the street, Linda Chang peered through her blinds, her phone already in her hand. 2 doors down, Robert Pierce stood on his lawn, arms crossed, scowling like Marcus had personally offended him. Pierce was Margaret's lieutenant, the HOA vice president, who enforced her rules with the enthusiasm of a mall security guard who'd always wanted to be a real cop. Marcus collected his mail bills mostly and a welcome home card from an old army buddy and walked back inside. The whole trip had taken 5 minutes. Rachel was waiting with her phone. "Margaret's already sent out an HOA-wide email," she said, showing him the screen. "Dear residents, it has come to my attention that some individuals are deliberately flouting our community standards. Let me be clear, the rules of Willowbrook Estates apply to everyone regardless of their background or profession. We cannot allow our neighborhood to be turned into a military zone. If you witness any violations, please report them immediately. Together we can maintain the peaceful, family-friendly environment we all value. Margaret Thornton, HOA President. Military Zone." Rachel laughed bitterly. "You checked the mail." "She's escalating," Marcus observed. "Classic tactic. Make the enemy seem more threatening than they are to justify your response." "Enemy? You're her neighbor." "Not anymore. Now I'm a threat to her authority." That evening, as Marcus and Rachel ate dinner Chinese takeout because neither felt like cooking, Rachel's laptop dinged with an email notification. "It's from someone named Frank Thornton," she said, frowning. Subject line says, "About Margaret." Marcus looked up from his lo mein. Thornton. Rachel opened the email and read aloud, "Miss Sullivan, I heard about what's happening with your brother and my ex-wife. I wanted you to know you're not alone. Margaret has a history of targeting veterans. She forced out Jim Martinez 2 years ago. Gulf War vet who flew a flag she deemed too large. Last year, it was Patricia Williams, Army nurse, who had a Support Our Troops sticker on her car. I'm a veteran myself. Margaret and I divorced 3 years ago, partly because of her attitude toward my service. She wasn't always like this, but something changed after our son deployed to Iraq. He came back different, struggled with PTSD, and Margaret couldn't handle it. Instead of getting help, she pushed him away. He took his own life 2 years ago. I'm telling you this not to excuse her behavior, but to explain it. She's turned her grief into anger at anything military. Your brother is just her latest target. If you need support, I know other veterans in the area who've had run-ins with the HOA. We've been documenting things. Frank Thornton, former Marine, current concerned citizen. Rachel set down the laptop. Jesus. Marcus stared at his food appetite gone. Her son killed himself. That's horrible, but it doesn't give her the right to... No, Marcus agreed. But it explains a lot. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the suburban evening carried on, kids playing, dogs barking, the distant sound of a lawnmower. Normal sounds of a normal life that felt anything but normal to Marcus. What do you want to do? Rachel finally asked. Marcus pushed his food around with his chopsticks. The same thing I always do. Survive. That's not enough anymore, Rachel said softly. You're home now. You get to do more than survive. You get to live. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed. Unknown number, but the area code was familiar. He answered. Sullivan. That you. The voice was gravelly, tinged with a Boston accent that 15 years hadn't softened. Ghost. Marcus sat up straighter. Jake Thompson, call sign Ghost, had been his teammate through 3 deployments. The kind of brother you choose in combat, bonded by experiences that civilians could never understand. Heard you were back in the world, Jake said. Also heard you're having some trouble with the local civilians. Marcus frowned. How did you... Tom Henderson. Turns out his cousin served with my brother. Small world. Anyway, I'm in San Diego for a training contract. That's what 2 hours from you. About that. Perfect. I'll be up this weekend. Haven't seen your ugly face in too long. Jake, you don't need to. Shut up, Marcus. You think I'm going to let some HOA Hitler mess with one of my brothers? Not happening. Besides, I want to see this suburban paradise you've been hiding in. After Marcus hung up, Rachel raised an eyebrow. Ghost. Long story. He's intense. Intense like you intense, or intense like actually intense? The second one. Rachel grinned. This should be interesting. The next morning, Wednesday, Margaret struck again. Marcus found another notice taped to his door, this one printed on official HOA letterhead with second notice stamped in red across the top. Mr. Sullivan. Yesterday's deliberate violation of HOA standards following your initial warning constitutes an act of defiance that cannot be tolerated. You were observed in full military attire at 3:47 p.m. in clear violation of the notice served to you yesterday morning. Fine assessed $250. Payment due within 30 days. Failure to pay will result in legal action and potential foreclosure proceedings. Additionally, you are required to attend a special HOA board meeting this Friday at 7 p.m. to discuss your continued violations. Margaret Thornton, HOA President. Rachel read it over his shoulder. Foreclosure. Can they actually do that? Technically, yes, Marcus said. HOAs have sued for less and won. This is insane. You know what I'm going through their financials. What? Rachel's expression had shifted into what Marcus recognized as her hunting mode, the same look she got when tracking down embezzled funds or tax fraud. HOA financial records are supposed to be available to all homeowners. I'm going to request them. Everything. Budget expenses, reserve funds, all of it. Why? Because in my experience, people who abuse power in one area usually abuse it in others. And Margaret Thornton strikes me as someone with secrets. Marcus watched his sister stride off with her laptop, determined and focused. He envied her clarity of purpose. Since coming home, he'd felt adrift, purposeless. In Afghanistan, every day had a mission and objective. Here, the biggest decision was what to have for breakfast. He walked out to the garage where his weights waited. Physical training had been mandatory in the Special Forces, but now it was one of the few things that made him feel anchored to his body. As he loaded the barbell, he noticed something tucked under his windshield wiper. Another note, but this one was different. Handwritten on plain paper, the message was brief. You're not welcome here. Leave before things get ugly. No signature, but the handwriting was careful, controlled. Someone trying to disguise their normal writing style. Marcus pocketed the note and continued his workout. He'd received death threats in 4 languages across 3 continents. A passive-aggressive note from a suburban vigilante barely registered, but it did confirm something Margaret was escalating and she wasn't working alone. That afternoon, Marcus decided to walk to the grocery store. It was only half a mile and he needed supplies. Plus, if he was honest, he wanted to see how far Margaret's influence extended beyond Willowbrook Estates. He wore his camouflage cargo pants and tactical shirt again, partially out of principle, partially because they were comfortable, but mostly because he'd learned long ago that backing down from a bully only encouraged them. The Safeway was busy with the afternoon shopping crowd. Marcus grabbed a cart and began working through his list muscle memory, guiding him through the familiar routine of resupply. He was comparing pasta sauce brands when he heard the whisper, "Is that a real soldier?" A boy, maybe 7 or 8, was tugging on his mother's sleeve and pointing at Marcus. The mother looked mortified, trying to shush her son while shooting apologetic glances at Marcus. "It's okay," Marcus said, crouching down to the kid's level. "Yes, I'm a real soldier. Well, I was. I'm retired now." The boy's eyes widened. "Did you fight bad guys?" "Sometimes. Mostly I tried to help people." "Cool. My dad says soldiers are heroes." The mother smiled nervously. "Thank you for your service." Marcus stood uncomfortable with the thanks he never knew how to accept. "Just doing my job, ma'am." He was reaching for a jar of peanut butter when he heard the familiar clicking of heels on linoleum. Margaret Thornton rounded the corner, pushing a cart filled with organic vegetables and wine bottles. She stopped dead when she saw him. "Mr. Sullivan." Her voice carried across the aisle like a declaration of war. "Miss Thornton." She abandoned her cart and marched over her face, flushed with indignation. "This is harassment." Marcus blinked. "I'm shopping." "You're deliberately wearing that uniform to provoke me." "I'm wearing clothes to the grocery store." "If that provokes you, that seems like a you problem." Several shoppers had stopped to watch the confrontation. Margaret noticed the attention and raised her voice, playing to the audience. "This man is deliberately intimidating residents of our community with his militaristic displays. He's been asked repeatedly to comply with neighborhood standards, but he refuses." An older man in a Vietnam veteran cap stepped forward. "Lady, the man's wearing army camos, not carrying a rifle." "Maybe you should mind your own business." Margaret turned on him. "This doesn't concern you." "Actually," another voice chimed in, "it does." A woman in her 30s wearing scrubs had joined the growing circle. "That's Master Sergeant Sullivan. He saved my cousin's unit in Kandahar. Show some respect." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He didn't recognize the woman, but these stories had a way of spreading through the veteran community. Margaret's face went from red to purple. "I don't care what he did overseas. In our neighborhood, your neighborhood, Tom Henderson had appeared with a cart full of beer and charcoal. Last I checked, we all lived there, and I don't remember voting to harass veterans." "The HOA board." "You mean you and your 2 puppets?" Tom stepped closer. "Linda only votes with you because you promised to approve her pool extension. Robert's just scared of you. That's not a board, Margaret. That's a dictatorship." The store manager, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, approached cautiously. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," Margaret said immediately. "This man is disturbing customers." The manager looked at Marcus, took in the uniform, the calm expression, the lack of any actual disturbance beyond Margaret's shouting. "Sir, are you active military?" "Recently retired, Special Forces." The manager nodded. "Thank you for your service." "Ma'am?" He turned to Margaret. "Unless this gentleman is actually doing something disruptive, I'm going to have to ask you to continue your shopping." Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." She spun on her heel and clicked away, leaving her cart abandoned in the aisle. Tom clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Don't let her get to you. She's been pulling this stuff for years." "Thanks for standing up," Marcus said. "Marines stick together, even with army pukes." Tom grinned to show he was joking. "You need backup at that board meeting Friday?" "I'll be okay." "Wasn't really a question. I'll be there. Pretty sure I can get a few others too." As Marcus finished his shopping, several people nodded at him. A few thanked him for his service, and one teenager asked for a selfie. It was more attention than he'd wanted, but it also sent a clear message: Margaret didn't speak for everyone. When he got home, Rachel was hunched over her laptop with the expression of a cat that had just spotted a particularly fat mouse. "You're not going to believe what I found," she said. Marcus set down the grocery bags. "What?" "Margaret's been HOA president for 8 years, right? Well, the HOA has been paying for a management company for the last 5. Thornton Property Management, LLC. Let me guess. Owned by one Margaret Thornton. She's been paying herself $3,000 a month to manage an HOA she's already president of. That's $36,000 a year for a volunteer position." Marcus whistled. "That's fraud, or at least a massive conflict of interest. But wait, it gets better. Remember those special assessments for landscape improvements last year? The ones that cost every homeowner an extra $500? Yeah. The landscaping company that got the contract owned by Margaret's brother. And according to these receipts, they charged twice the market rate." Marcus sat down processing this information. "How much money are we talking about?" "Over the last 5 years, at least $300,000 in questionable payments. Maybe more. I'm still digging." "This is why she's so desperate to maintain control," Marcus said. "It's not about the rules or property values. It's about money." "Exactly. And if this comes out..." "She's finished." Rachel grinned. "Want to know the best part? HOA board members can be held personally liable for financial misconduct. She could lose everything." Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Purpose. This wasn't just about his right to wear camouflage anymore. This was about exposing a corruption that had been bleeding his neighbors for years. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Keep being yourself. Let her escalate. The more desperate she gets, the more mistakes she'll make. And Friday at that board meeting, we're going to war." Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile since he'd come home. "Roger that." Thursday morning brought another surprise. Marcus was doing pull-ups in his garage when a Harley-Davidson roared into his driveway. The rider killed the engine, pulled off his helmet, and revealed a face Marcus would recognize anywhere. Jake "Ghost" Thompson stood 6'3", built like a linebacker who'd decided to become a weapon instead. His beard was longer than regulation would have allowed, streaked with premature gray from too many deployments and too much stress. Tattoos covered his arms, unit patches, coordinates of significant battles, names of the fallen. "You said weekend," Marcus said, dropping from the bar. "I lied." Jake grabbed Marcus in a bear hug that could have cracked ribs. "Figured you might need backup sooner." They stood there for a moment, two warriors reunited, before Jake pulled back and studied Marcus's face. "You look like shit," he said bluntly. "Thanks. You look like a biker gang recruited a Viking." "Close. Private security now. The money's stupid good, and I only have to shoot people occasionally." Jake looked around the garage, taking in the neat suburban setting. "This is weird, man. You in suburbia. Tell me about it." "So where's this HOA lady who needs educating?" Marcus filled him in on the situation while they walked inside. Rachel looked up from her laptop, did a double take at Jake's appearance, and immediately grinned. "You must be Ghost." "Ma'am." Jake gave a theatrical bow. "And you're the sister who kept this idiot's house while he was playing in the sandbox." "Someone had to. I'm Rachel." "Jake. And I hear you've been doing some forensic accounting on the local dictator." Rachel's grin widened. "Want to see?" As Rachel showed Jake her findings, Marcus watched his friend's expression darken. Jake had always had a strong sense of justice, a black and white view of right and wrong that had made him exceptional in combat and occasionally problematic in civilian life. "So she's not just a bully," Jake said. "She's a thief." "Allegedly," Rachel corrected. "But yeah." Jake pulled out his phone. "How many veterans in this neighborhood?" "At least a dozen," Marcus said. "Why?" "Because if there's one thing I learned in the teams, it's that you don't fight alone." He scrolled through his contacts. "Rodriguez is in LA, Cooper's in Vegas, Mitchell's up in Fresno, all within driving distance." "Jake, you don't need to. What did I say about shutting up?" Jake was already dialing. "Rodriguez. Yeah, it's goes. You busy this weekend?" "Good. Remember Sullivan?" Yeah, that uptight asshole, he's having a situation. HOA trying to tell him he can't wear camo. He paused, listening. That's what I said. Friday night, bring your Class A's. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Dress uniforms. Jake grinned. If she wants to make this about military intimidation, let's show her what that actually looks like. By Thursday evening, Jake had rallied 5 more members of their old unit. The group chat was lighting up with messages from operators Marcus hadn't heard from in years, all expressing variations of outrage and offers of support. Margaret, meanwhile, had gone silent. No new notices, no emails, no visible presence in the neighborhood. It was the kind of silence that preceded an ambush, and Marcus knew better than to trust it. She's planning something, he told Rachel and Jake over dinner actual home-cooked meal, because Jake had insisted on making his infamous Special Forces chili that could strip paint and clear sinuses. Let her plan, Jake said, spooning another volcanic helping onto his plate. We've got truth law and about 200 years of combined military experience on our side. Plus financial fraud, Rachel added. Don't forget the fraud. How could I forget the fraud? Jake raised his beer. To taking down tyrants foreign and domestic. They clinked bottles, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow's meeting was going to be more complicated than they expected. Margaret Thornton hadn't held power for 8 years by folding at the first sign of resistance. She was planning something, and if Marcus had learned anything in 15 years of combat, it was that the enemy always got a vote. Friday arrived with the kind of dramatic weather that would have been too on the nose in a movie, dark clouds rolling in from the Pacific, the air thick with the promise of rain. Marcus stood at his bedroom window, watching the storm build, and thought about all the times he'd watched weather roll across foreign landscapes, wondering if each storm would bring enemy movement or just mud. Jake was already up doing push-ups in the living room, while Rachel prepared what she called her war documents binders full of financial records, HOA bylaws, and legal precedents. The house felt like a forward operating base before a mission, that familiar tension of preparation mixed with anticipation. Rodriguez just texted, Jake said between push-ups. He's 30 minutes out. Cooper and Mitchell are riding together, should be here by noon. You really called in the whole squad for an HOA meeting? Marcus asked. Jake flipped to his feet in one smooth motion. Brother, you do the same for any of us. Besides, these suburban commandos need to learn what real intimidation looks like. The doorbell rang at 9 a.m. sharp. Marcus expected another notice from Margaret, but instead found Tom Henderson standing there with 2 other men. Morning, Marcus. This is Jim Martinez and Bill Patterson. Jim's the Gulf War vet. Margaret ran out 2 years ago. Bill's a Navy corpsman, lives over on Maple Street. Jim Martinez was a compact man with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much. His handshake was firm, his gaze direct. Heard you're taking on the Queen. About time someone did. Bill Patterson looked like he could still run a 6-minute mile despite being in his 60s. 3 tours in Vietnam, he said simply. I've been keeping my head down to avoid Margaret's attention, but enough's enough. Come in, Marcus said. We're planning strategy. They gathered in the living room where Rachel had transformed the coffee table into a command center. Maps of the neighborhood HOA documents and her laptop displaying financial spreadsheets made it look like they were planning an invasion. Here's what we know. Rachel began pulling up a presentation she'd prepared. Margaret Thornton has been systematically defrauding the HOA for at least 5 years. She's created shell companies, inflated contracts, and embezzled approximately $300,000. Jim whistled. We knew she was corrupt, but this... It gets worse, Rachel continued. I found records of her targeting specific residents, always veterans or minorities, with excessive fines and harassment until they sold their homes. Guess who bought those properties through another LLC? Margaret, Bill said grimly. Her brother, actually, but yes, same network. They've flipped 6 houses this way, making roughly $400,000 in profit. Tom's face was red with anger. That explains why the Washingtons left so suddenly last year. They were a nice black family military, too. Margaret fined them for everything, grass-height trash can placement, even the color of their daughter's bicycle. Marcus felt the familiar cold anger he'd experienced when discovering corruption among Afghan officials. But this was worse somehow. This was home. These were Americans doing this to other Americans, to veterans who'd served their country. Tonight's meeting, he said, we expose all of it. She won't go down easy, Jim warned. I tried to fight her 2 years ago. She had a lawyer turn the whole board against me, made my life hell until I sold. Difference is, Jake said, entering the room with his phone. Now she's got multiple opponents, and we've got something she doesn't expect. What's that? Bill asked. Jake grinned. Cooper just sent me something interesting. Turns out he's been doing cybersecurity since he got out. Completely legal public record search on Margaret turned up some fascinating details. Like her son, the one who killed himself. He left a note. It specifically mentioned his mother's hatred of his service, how she called him a trained killer and refused to let him in the house while wearing his uniform. The room went silent. That's... Tom couldn't finish. It's tragic, Marcus said quietly, and it explains her behavior, but it doesn't excuse it. There's more, Jake continued. Frank Thornton, the ex-husband. He's been documenting everything. Every illegal fine, every discriminatory action, every financial irregularity. He's got 5 years of evidence and he's willing to testify. Rachel pulled up her phone. We should coordinate with him. Already did, Jake said. He'll be at the meeting tonight. The storm that had been building all morning finally broke around noon, rain hammering against the windows with military precision. Marcus watched it fall, thinking about all the rain he'd endured in various countries. How it always made everything harder, but somehow clearer too. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Dante Rodriguez, still looking like he could breach a door with his pinky. Behind him stood Cooper, pale, wiry, more computer nerd than commando these days, and Mitchell, whose 1,000-yard stare had somehow gotten more intense since Afghanistan. The gang's all here, Rodriguez said, water dripping from his jacket. Where's the target? Easy killer, Marcus said, but he was smiling. This is a legal operation. For now, Mitchell muttered, which was more words than he usually strung together. They spent the afternoon like they used to spend mission prep, going over intelligence, planning contingencies, identifying potential problems. Rachel provided the financial ammunition Jake coordinated with other veterans in the area, and Marcus tried to keep everyone focused on the legal path to victory. Remember, he said, looking particularly at Mitchell, who had a tendency toward what they diplomatically called direct action. We're not in Afghanistan. We can't just blow things up when they don't go our way. Shame, Mitchell said, which got a laugh from everyone. Linda Chang knocked on the door around 3 p.m., looking nervous and soaked from the rain. Marcus recognized her as one of Margaret's board allies, and immediately everyone tensed. Mrs. Chang, Marcus said carefully, not opening the door fully. Mr. Sullivan, Can I come in? Please, I need to talk to you. Marcus looked back at Jake, who shrugged. He let her in. Linda stood dripping in the foyer, looking at the assembled veterans with something between fear and awe. I know what you must think of me, she began. I voted with Margaret on everything, but I can't do this anymore. What changed? Rachel asked, not unkindly, but not warmly either. Linda pulled out her phone, showed them a text message thread. Margaret sent this last night. She's planning to call the police tonight, claim you threatened her. She's got Robert ready to back up her story. She even suggested I should say you made inappropriate advances toward me. The room erupted in angry voices. Jake's was the loudest. That manipulative. I won't do it, Linda said quickly. I have a son in the Navy. I won't be part of attacking veterans anymore. I'm switching my vote tonight. Whatever you need to remove her, you have my support. Marcus studied her face, looking for deception. He found only exhaustion and guilt. Why should we trust you? Linda reached into her purse, pulled out a flash drive. Because I've been recording every board meeting for 2 years. Margaret doesn't know. It was insurance in case she turned on me. Everything's on here, her admitting to the financial schemes, the targeting of veterans, all of it. Rachel took the drive like it was made of gold. This could be criminal evidence. I know, Linda said. I'm probably going to lose my position too. I'm okay with that. I want to make things right. Tom stepped forward. Linda, this took courage. Thank you. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. The meeting's at 7. Margaret's already there setting up. She's got a lawyer coming, someone from the city. She's planning to paint you all as a dangerous militia trying to take over the neighborhood. Let her try, Rodriguez said darkly. After Linda left, they regrouped. The flash drive contained hours of recordings, including several clearly illegal statements from Margaret. Rachel was practically glowing as she compiled the evidence. This is it, she said. This is enough to not just remove her, but prosecute her. At 5 p.m., they began to prepare for the meeting. The veterans all went to change, not into their camouflage, but into their dress uniforms. Marcus put on his Army service uniform for the first time since his retirement ceremony, every ribbon and medal precisely placed. The Silver Star, Bronze Stars, Purple Heart. Each one a story of sacrifice and service. Jake emerged in his navy dress blues looking like recruitment poster material despite the beard. Rodriguez wore Marine dress blues. Cooper was in Air Force Mitchell, an Army like Marcus. Even Tom had found his old Marine uniform, though he had to leave the jacket unbuttoned. Look at us, Jake said. We clean up nice. We look like what we are, Marcus said. Americans who served. Rachel had changed into a sharp business suit, her laptop bag loaded with evidence. You ready for this? Marcus thought about the question. Was he ready? After months of drifting, of feeling purposeless, he finally felt that familiar clarity of mission. Yeah, I'm ready. The rain had stopped by the time they left for the community center, leaving the streets shining under the streetlights. Their convoy of vehicles must have looked impressive or intimidating, depending on your perspective, as they pulled into the parking lot. The community center was already packed. Word had spread through the neighborhood about tonight's confrontation, and it seemed like everyone wanted to witness it. Marcus saw faces he recognized from the grocery store, others from his morning runs. Some looked supportive, others curious, a few openly hostile. Margaret stood at the front of the room behind a podium, looking like she was about to deliver a State of the Union address. She'd dressed for war, too. Power suit, American flag pin. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus, and an expression that could have curdled milk. Robert Pierce flanked her on one side, and a man in an expensive suit, presumably the lawyer, on the other. The veterans entered together, their uniforms drawing gasps and whispers from the crowd. Several people started applauding, which Margaret tried to gavel into silence. This is an official HOA board meeting, she said, her voice sharp. Not a military parade. I'll have order. Marcus and his team took seats in the front row. Behind them, Frank Thornton sat with a group of neighbors, including Mrs. Chen and the woman from the grocery store who'd recognized Marcus. The room was standing room only. Margaret gavelled again. We're here tonight to address the repeated violations of HOA guidelines by Mr. Marcus Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan has refused to comply with community standards regarding appropriate attire and has created an intimidating environment for our residents. Objection! A voice called from the back. Everyone turned to see a woman in a judge's robes entering the room. That's prejudicial language, Margaret. Margaret went pale. Judge Harrison, what are you doing here? I live in this neighborhood too, Margaret, and I've been watching this situation with great interest. Judge Harrison took a seat in the middle of the room. Please continue, but do remember that words have legal meanings. Flustered Margaret shuffled her papers. Yes, well, Mr. Sullivan, you've been given multiple warnings about wearing military camouflage in violation of our community guidelines. Do you have anything to say? Marcus stood his medals, catching the fluorescent lights. Yes, I do, but first I'd like to know which specific bylaw prohibits military attire. Margaret's lawyer stood. Section 7, subsection 3A, clearly states that aggressive or intimidating displays are prohibited. Marcus finished. I've read it. My question is, who determines what's aggressive or intimidating? And more importantly, does this board really want to argue that a United States military uniform is inherently aggressive? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The board has discretion, the lawyer began. The board has overreached, Judge Harrison interrupted. But please continue. Jake stood up. Ma'am, if I may. I'm Lieutenant Commander Jake Thompson, United States Navy. I've served with Master Sergeant Sullivan for 10 years. This man has 3 Purple Hearts. He earned them defending the very freedoms you're now trying to restrict. This isn't about his service, Margaret started. Isn't it? Frank Thornton stood, his voice carrying across the room. Margaret, you've targeted every veteran in this neighborhood. Jim Martinez, Patricia Williams, the Washingtons. All veterans or military families, all forced out by your harassment. That's slander, Margaret snapped. It's documented, Rachel said, standing with her laptop. I have 5 years of HOA records showing a clear pattern of discrimination against military families. Excessive fines, arbitrary violations, targeted enforcement. It's all here. She connected her laptop to the projector system, displaying a spreadsheet on the screen. Mr. Martinez fined $2,000 over 6 months for violations that were never issued to non-veteran neighbors. The Washingtons $3,500 in fines, including one for excessive patriotic displays for flying an American flag. The crowd was getting restless. Several people were taking photos of the screen. Those were legitimate violations, Margaret insisted, but her voice was less certain. Were they? Linda Chang stood up, surprising everyone, especially Margaret. Because I've been on this board for 3 years, and I've watched you target people, Margaret. I've stayed quiet out of fear, but not anymore. Linda, sit down, Margaret hissed. No, I'm done being your puppet. Linda pulled out her phone. I have recordings, Margaret. Every meeting where you said we needed to clean out the undesirables. Every time you used HOA funds for personal expenses. The room exploded. People were shouting, demanding answers. Margaret was banging her gavel frantically. Order, order, she screamed. Judge Harrison stood. Miss Thornton, I think it's time we heard these recordings. This is an illegal recording, the lawyer protested. California is a 2-party consent state. HOA board meetings are public forums, Judge Harrison said calmly. Recording them is perfectly legal. Please proceed, Mrs. Chang. Linda connected her phone to the sound system. Margaret's voice filled the room clear and damning. I don't care if he's a veteran. These people come back broken and dangerous. We don't need that element in our community. Find a reason to fine him. Make his life difficult enough and he'll leave like the others. The recording continued, each statement worse than the last. Margaret talking about those people and their low-class lifestyle, discussing using HOA funds for personal legal fees, plotting to force out residents to drive down property values for her brother's company to buy. By the time it finished, the room was silent except for Margaret's heavy breathing. I move for the immediate removal of Margaret Thornton as HOA president, Tom Henderson said. Second, Linda said immediately. You can't do this, Margaret shrieked. I've kept this neighborhood safe. I've maintained our property values. You people don't understand what I've sacrificed. What you've sacrificed. Marcus spoke quietly, but his voice carried. Ma'am, everyone in this room has sacrificed something. The difference is, we didn't use our pain as an excuse to hurt others. Margaret turned on him, her face twisted with rage. Don't you dare lecture me about sacrifice. My son died because of people like you. The military destroyed him, sent him back broken, and you all just keep perpetuating the cycle, walking around like heroes when you're nothing but killers. The room gasped. Even Robert Pierce stepped away from her. Frank Thornton stood slowly. Danny didn't die because of the military, Margaret. He died because when he came home needing help, needing understanding, you called him a monster. You locked him out of his own home for wearing his uniform. You abandoned him when he needed you most. Shut up, Margaret screamed. You don't know anything. I know our son needed his mother and you weren't there, Frank said, tears streaming down his face. And instead of dealing with that guilt, you've spent years punishing every veteran you could find. Margaret collapsed into her chair, sobbing. For a moment, the room was silent except for her crying. Then Marcus did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He walked over to Margaret and knelt beside her chair. Miss Thornton, he said gently, I'm sorry about your son. I've lost brothers too. The pain never really goes away. But this what you're doing, it's not honoring his memory. It's just spreading more pain. Margaret looked at him through her tears, and for a moment Marcus saw not the tyrant, but the grieving mother. Then her face hardened again. Get away from me, she spat. Marcus stepped back. He'd tried. Tom cleared his throat. We still have a motion on the floor, all in favor of removing Margaret Thornton as HOA president. Every hand in the room went up except Margaret's and Robert's. Even Robert, after a moment, slowly raised his hand. Motion carried, Tom said. Margaret Thornton, you are hereby removed as HOA president, effective immediately. Margaret stood on shaking legs. You'll hear from my lawyer. This isn't over. Actually, Judge Harrison said, it is. Mrs. Chang, would you be willing to provide those recordings to the district attorney's office? Embezzlement of HOA funds is a felony. Margaret's lawyer grabbed her arm. We're leaving. Don't say another word. As they left, Margaret turned back one last time. Her eyes found Marcus. You destroyed everything. No, ma'am, Marcus said. You did that yourself. After Margaret left, the meeting continued for another hour. Tom was elected temporary president with a promise of full elections next month. The board voted to void all fines against veterans, refund those already paid, and conduct a full audit of the HOA finances. We've got a lot of healing to do, Tom said to the room. This neighborhood has been divided for too long, but we can fix this. Together. As people filed out, many stopped to shake hands with Marcus and the other veterans. Mrs. Chen hugged him. Thank you for standing up to her. The woman from the grocery store introduced herself as Sarah Mitchell. My cousin's unit, the one you saved in Kandahar, he never forgot that. Neither will I. Outside, the veterans gathered in the parking lot. The night had cleared, stars visible through gaps in the clouds. Hell of a fight, Rodriguez said, lighting a cigarette. Different kind of battle, Cooper agreed, but just as important. Mitchell, man of few words, simply nodded and clapped Marcus on the shoulder. Jake pulled Marcus aside. You did good in there, especially at the end trying to reach out to her. She's in pain, Marcus said. Doesn't excuse what she did, but you're still trying to save everyone, even the enemy. Jake shook his head. Never change, brother. Rachel appeared practically bouncing with excitement. The DA wants to meet Monday. With the evidence we have, Margaret's looking at serious charges. Also, the forensic audit is going to be thorough. We might be able to recover most of the stolen funds. Good, Marcus said. He felt tired suddenly, the adrenaline of confrontation fading. You okay? Rachel asked. Marcus looked around at his sister, his brothers in arms, his neighbors, all talking in small groups, the community beginning to heal. For the first time since coming home, he felt like he belonged somewhere. Yeah, he said, I'm good. But the story wasn't over. As they drove home, Marcus noticed a van following them. Not obviously, but with the kind of professional distance that suggested surveillance. He mentioned it to Jake, who checked the mirror. Could be press, Jake said. This kind of story veteran stands up to corrupt HOA, it's media gold. Could be, Marcus agreed, but his instincts were tingling. They pulled into Marcus's driveway, the van continuing past without slowing. Maybe he was being paranoid. Combat had a way of making you see threats everywhere. Inside, they found a surprise. Tom Henderson was on the porch with several other neighbors, including Bill and Jim. They'd brought beer and pizza. Figured you boys deserved a celebration, Tom said. It's been a long time since this neighborhood felt like a community. They sat on the porch, sharing stories and drinks. Jim talked about his time in Desert Storm. Bill about Vietnam. The younger veterans shared their own experiences, carefully edited for civilian consumption. It was the kind of gathering Marcus had missed without realizing it, the camaraderie, the understanding that came from shared service. Around midnight, as people were leaving, Frank Thornton arrived. He looked exhausted, older than his years. Marcus, he said, can we talk? They walked to the edge of the driveway away from the others. I wanted to thank you, Frank said, for what you said to Margaret. About Danny. You didn't have to do that. Her son was a brother veteran, Marcus said simply. He deserved to be honored, not used as a weapon. Frank nodded, tears in his eyes. She wasn't always like this, you know. When Danny first enlisted, she was so proud. Had a Blue Star flag in the window, went to every FRG meeting, but when he came back different, struggling, she couldn't handle it. Said the Army had stolen her baby boy and sent back a stranger. PTSD changes people, Marcus said. It's not easy on families. I tried to get him help, get her to understand, but she was so angry. At the military, at me for supporting him, at Danny for not just getting over it. When he died, she broke completely, turned all that grief into rage. She needs help, Marcus said. Frank laughed bitterly. Try telling her that. She sees therapy as weakness medication as failure. She'd rather destroy everything around her than admit she needs help. They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the night sounds of suburbia. Distant music, a dog barking, the hum of air conditioners. "There's something else," Frank said. "Margaret's not done. I know her. She's been pushed into a corner, and that's when she's most dangerous. Be careful." "What do you think she'll do?" "I don't know, but she's got money hidden away, connections. She won't go quietly." Frank handed Marcus a business card. "That's my number. If you need anything, call." After Frank left, Marcus found Jake on the porch keeping watch like old times. "Can't sleep?" Marcus asked. "Habit," Jake said. "Plus, something feels off." "The van." "That and the way Margaret looked when she left. I've seen that look before. In Afghanistan, remember that village elder who smiled and shook hands, then tried to blow us up the next day?" Marcus remembered. "You think she's planning something?" "I think she's not the type to accept defeat, and we embarrassed her publicly. That's dangerous." They sat in comfortable silence, two soldiers on watch in suburbia. It should have felt ridiculous, but somehow it didn't. The battlefield had changed, but the need for vigilance remained. "You know what's funny?" Jake said. "We spent all those years fighting for freedom and democracy overseas, and we come home to find we need to fight for it here too." "Different kind of enemy," Marcus agreed. "Is it though? Corruption, abuse of power targeting the vulnerable sounds pretty familiar to me." A car drove slowly past its headlights, sweeping across the yard. It didn't stop, but both men tensed until it passed. "How long are you staying?" Marcus asked. "Got a week of leave. Figured I'd stick around, make sure things settle." "You don't have to." "Shut up, Marcus. We've had this conversation. You do the same for me." That was true. The bonds forged in combat didn't disappear just because the war ended. If anything, they became more important when navigating the strange terrain of civilian life. Rachel came out with coffee despite the late hour. "You two planning to stay up all night?" "Just for a bit," Marcus said. She sat down between them. "This isn't over, is it?" "Probably not," Marcus admitted. "Good," she said, surprising them both. "You need this. A mission, a purpose. You've been drifting since you got back, Marcus. But tonight, you were yourself again." Marcus wanted to protest, but she was right. For months, he'd felt like a ghost haunting his own life. Tonight, standing up to Margaret, protecting his community, fighting for what was right, he'd felt alive again. "Plus," Rachel added with a grin, "I really want to see Margaret in handcuffs." Jake laughed. "Bloodthirsty little thing, aren't you? You haven't seen me in court. I make prosecutors cry." They stayed up talking until dawn when the suburban world began its Saturday morning ritual, joggers passing by sprinklers, activating the distant sound of lawnmowers starting up. Normal, peaceful sounds that Marcus was finally beginning to appreciate. But as the sun rose, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. Spray painted on his garage door in red letters, "You're not safe here." Jake saw it at the same time. "Well," he said calmly, "looks like the war's not over after all." Marcus stared at the red spray paint dripping down his garage door like fresh blood. The words, "You're not safe here," had been painted with deliberate care, not the hasty scrawl of teenage vandals, but the measured strokes of someone who wanted the message to be clear. Jake was already in tactical mode, phone out, taking photos from multiple angles. "Cameras?" he asked. "Never installed them," Marcus said. "Didn't think I'd need them in suburbia." "First mistake," Jake muttered. "Always maintain perimeter security." Rachel emerged from the house in her pajamas, coffee mug in hand. She stopped dead when she saw the vandalism. "Are you kidding me?" "Call the police," Marcus said. "On it." She pulled out her phone, but Jake stopped her. "Wait, let's document everything first. Cooper." He called back toward the house where Cooper had crashed on the couch. "Get out here with your tech gear." Cooper stumbled out, took one look at the garage, and immediately went into what they called his cyber mode. He pulled out a device that looked like a modified smartphone. "Give me 10 minutes. I'll find every camera in a 3-block radius that might have caught something." Neighbors were beginning to notice. Tom Henderson walked over in his bathrobe, took one look, and his face darkened. "Margaret." "That's the assumption," Marcus said. "This is witness intimidation," Tom said. She's trying to scare you before the DA meeting. More neighbors gathered. Mrs. Chen brought towels and a bucket. We'll help you clean this up. Not yet, Jake said. Evidence first. By the time the police arrived, half the neighborhood was in Marcus's front yard. Officer Davidson, a young cop who looked fresh out of the academy, seemed overwhelmed by the crowd. Everyone needs to step back, he said, trying to establish a crime scene. His partner, Sergeant Rita Morales, was older and clearly a military veteran, Marcus realized, recognizing the way she carried herself. Afghanistan or Iraq? Marcus asked. Both. Military police, EU, Special Forces, 5 tours. Her demeanor shifted slightly more respectful. I heard about last night's HOA meeting, Margaret Thornton's removal. This is probably related. Probably, Marcus agreed. She examined the vandalism carefully. This isn't random. The paint's still wet, probably done between 3 and 5 a.m. We'll canvass for witnesses, check security cameras, but honestly, without direct evidence, it'll be hard to prove who did it. Cooper appeared at Marcus's elbow. About that evidence. He showed his tablet to Sergeant Morales. Traffic camera 2 blocks away caught a white van passing at 3:47 a.m. Same van circled the neighborhood 3 times between 3:30 and 4:00. License plate, case partial, but I can enhance it. Morales raised an eyebrow. Legally, I'm using publicly available traffic data, Cooper said innocently. Nothing that wouldn't hold up in court. While the police processed the scene, Marcus noticed Robert Pierce standing at the edge of the crowd. Margaret's former ally looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight, avoiding eye contact. Marcus walked over. Robert. I didn't know she'd do this, Robert said quickly. I swear, I stopped supporting her after last night. But you know something. Robert hesitated, then pulled Marcus aside. She called me at 2 a.m., ranting, making threats, said she was going to burn it all down before she let you win. Did you record it? No, but she mentioned hiring someone, said she knew people who could handle problems. I thought she was just drunk and angry. Marcus studied Robert's face. The man was scared, genuinely scared. Will you tell the police? If I do, she'll come after me next. She's already coming after everyone. The only way this stops is if we stop her. Robert nodded slowly. Okay, I'll talk to them. As Robert gave his statement to Sergeant Morales, Rachel pulled Marcus aside. I've been tracking Margaret's financial movements. She withdrew $50,000 in cash yesterday afternoon. That's a lot of money for someone who just lost their job. It gets better. She also booked a flight to Costa Rica for next week. One way. Marcus felt the pieces clicking together. Margaret wasn't just fighting back, she was preparing to run. The vandalism. The threats, they were distractions meant to keep them focused on defending while she covered her tracks. We need to move faster, he told Rachel. Can you get the forensic audit expedited? Already on it. I called in some favors. We'll have preliminary results by Monday. Jake approached with Rodriguez and Mitchell. We're setting up a watch rotation. Nobody's getting near your house again without us knowing. This is suburbia, not Fallujah, Marcus protested. Principles are the same, Mitchell said in his usual terse style. Secure the perimeter, maintain observation, respond to threats. Marcus wanted to argue, but the paint on his garage door suggested maybe suburban warfare required the same vigilance as the foreign kind. By noon, the vandalism had been cleaned. The neighbors insisted on helping, despite Jake's protests about preserving evidence. Cooper had enhanced the traffic footage enough to get a full license plate. The van was registered to a private security company called Pinnacle Solutions. That's interesting, Jake said, looking at the company's website. Pinnacle Solutions is owned by Derek Thornton. Margaret's brother, Rachel said. The same one who's been getting the inflated landscaping contracts. So it's a family operation, Marcus said. How deep does this go? Cooper was typing furiously. According to public records, the Thornton family has interests in 12 different companies, all interconnected. Construction, landscaping, property management, private security. They've been using the HOA as a cash cow, and Margaret was the inside person making it happen. That's RICO territory, Rachel said excitedly. Racketeering. This isn't just HOA fraud anymore. It's organized crime. The doorbell rang. Everyone tensed, but it was just a delivery driver with a package. Marcus signed for it, noticed it had no return address. Inside carefully, he opened it. It was a thumb drive and a note. "You want the truth about Margaret? Check the files. A friend." "Could be a trap," Jake warned. "Malware tracking software." "I'll check it," Cooper said, pulling out a laptop he apparently kept isolated for potentially dangerous files. After several minutes of scanning, he nodded. "It's clean, and you're going to want to see this." The drive contained hundreds of documents, emails, financial records, contracts, but most damning were the audio files. Margaret's voice recorded over several years discussing bribes, threatening residents, planning to force out undesirable elements. "Who sent this?" Marcus asked. Rachel was reading through the metadata. "Based on the file creation dates and email headers, I think this came from inside Margaret's organization, someone close to her." Marcus thought about the timing. Right after Margaret's public humiliation, someone in her inner circle had decided to jump ship. The Thornton empire was crumbling from within. "We need to get this to the DA immediately," Rachel said. "And the FBI," Cooper added. "This crosses state lines. Some of these contracts involve federal funds." As they organized the evidence, Frank Thornton called. "Marcus, you need to know something. Margaret just visited Danny's grave. She only does that when she's about to do something extreme." "What kind of extreme?" "The last time she went there was right before she had Jim Martinez's car vandalized and his dog poisoned." Marcus felt his blood run cold. She poisoned his dog? Could never prove it, but yes. Margaret doesn't just fight back. She escalates until her enemies break or leave. After the call, Marcus gathered his team. "We need to end this quickly. She's getting more dangerous." "Agreed," Jake said. "In Afghanistan, when an enemy got desperate, that's when they were most dangerous. Suicide attacks, scorched earth tactics." "So what do we do?" Rachel asked. Marcus thought about it. In combat, when facing a desperate enemy, you had two choices: hunker down and wait them out, or go on the offensive and end it quickly. "We go after her support network," he decided. "Cut off her resources, isolate her, force her to make mistakes." Rodriguez grinned. "Now you're talking. What's the plan?" They spent the afternoon planning their campaign like a military operation. Cooper would trace the financial networks, Rachel would coordinate with law enforcement, Jake would handle security, and Marcus would be the public face rallying the neighborhood. That evening, they held an impromptu meeting at Marcus's house. 40 neighbors showed up, cramming into his living room and spilling into the kitchen. The vandalism had galvanized the community in a way the HOA meeting hadn't. "Margaret Thornton declared war on this neighborhood," Tom Henderson said. "She's been stealing from us, intimidating us, dividing us for years. It ends now." Linda Chang, looking more confident than she had in years, stood up. "I have more recordings. Every dirty deal, every threat. I'm turning it all over to the authorities." Bill Patterson raised his hand. "What about the other board members who enabled her?" "We give them a choice," Marcus said. "Come forward now and cooperate or go down with her." Mrs. Chen spoke up. "My nephew is a journalist with the LA Times. He wants to write about this. Should I call him?" Marcus looked at Jake, who nodded. "Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Let the whole city know what's been happening here." As the meeting continued, Marcus's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He stepped outside to answer. "Mr. Sullivan." The voice was female, young, nervous. "Yes. This is Emma Thornton, Margaret's daughter." Marcus remembered Frank mentioning her. She'd been away at college when her brother died, had a complicated relationship with her mother. "I'm listening." "My mother, she's lost it. She's at my Uncle Derek's office right now, and they're shredding documents. I think she's planning to run." "Why are you telling me this?" There was a long pause. "Because what she did to Danny, what she's doing to you and the other veterans, it's wrong. My brother would be ashamed of her. He loved the Army, loved his brothers. He would hate what she's become." "Emma, would you be willing to talk to the police?" Yes, but I'm scared. She's my mother, but she's also dangerous." "I know. We can protect you. There's more. She has a storage unit off the books. Unit 47 at Store Safe on Maple Avenue. That's where she keeps the real financial records, the ones that show everything. Marcus waved Jake over. Emma, can you meet us somewhere safe? The Starbucks on 5th Street, 20 minutes. We'll be there. Marcus and Jake left immediately while Rachel called Sergeant Morales with the tip about the document shredding. The Starbucks was mostly empty, and they found Emma in a corner booth hunched over a laptop. She looked like a younger version of Margaret, same sharp features, same intense eyes, but where Margaret's face was hard with anger, Emma's was soft with grief. Thank you for coming, she said. Marcus sat across from her Jake, standing watch. This is brave what you're doing. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Danny was my hero. When he came back changed, I tried to help, but Mom wouldn't let me. Said he needed to man up, that therapy was for weaklings. She drove him away, and then when he died, she rewrote history, made herself the victim, him the one who abandoned her. She pulled out a key. This is for the storage unit. Everything's there. Both sets of books, the real contracts, correspondence with city officials she bribed. She thought she was being clever keeping it off-site. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Jake asked, not unkindly. I was away at school, only found out recently how bad things had gotten. When I confronted her after last night's meeting, she said I was betraying the family, that I was as weak as Danny. Emma's voice broke. She doesn't even say his name anymore. Just your brother or the soldier. Marcus reached across the table, touched her hand gently. Your brother was a hero. Whatever demons he fought, whatever pain he carried, he served with honor. Don't let her take that away from him. Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. There's something else. My Uncle Derek, he's got a crew of guys, ex-military contractors who went bad. They do dirty work for him, intimidation, vandalism, worse. Mom hired them for tonight. Tonight, Jake tensed. They're supposed to hit your house again, but not just vandalism this time. They want to make an example of you. Marcus and Jake exchanged looks. This had just escalated from suburban dispute to potential violence. What time? Jake asked. 2 a.m., 4 men. They'll come in a van, disable any cameras, break and trash the place. Maybe rough you up if you're there. Jake pulled out his phone. I need to make some calls. While Jake coordinated with the rest of the team, Marcus stayed with Emma. We're going to stop them, but you need to be somewhere safe. I'm staying with a friend. Mom doesn't know where. Good. After tonight, this will be over. Emma looked at him hopefully. You really think so? Your mother made a tactical error. She's fighting the wrong battle. This isn't about HOA rules anymore. It's about justice. They left Emma at the Starbucks and headed to the storage unit. Sergeant Morales met them there with a warrant that Judge Harrison had expedited. The unit was a gold mine, boxes of documents, hard drives, even cash, hundreds of thousands in neat bundles. Holy shit, Morales said, forgetting professionalism. This is huge. Rachel arrived with the forensic accounting team she'd assembled. They dove into the documents like kids at Christmas. This goes back 15 years, Rachel said, scanning through files. Margaret's been stealing since the day she became HOA president. We're looking at over $2 million in embezzled funds. And here, one of her colleagues said, holding up a folder. Correspondence with city planning officials. She was paying bribes to get zoning changes that benefited her brother's development company. Morales called for backup and an evidence team. This is going to take all night to process. Marcus left them to it and headed home with Jake and the others. They had preparations to make for the 2 a.m. visit. The plan was simple: let the crew come catch them in the act and end this decisively. Cooper had set up hidden cameras around the property. Rodriguez and Mitchell took position in the neighbors' yards with night vision equipment. Jake and Marcus would be inside ready. Just like old times, Jake said, checking his equipment. They weren't armed. This was suburbia, not a war zone, but they had zip ties, flashlights, and the kind of training that made weapons optional. Tom Henderson insisted on joining them. This is my neighborhood too. By 1 a.m., everyone was in position. The street was quiet, peaceful. It was hard to believe violence was coming to this manicured suburban paradise. At 1:47 a.m., Cooper's voice crackled through their earpieces. Van approaching, no lights. Marcus watched through the window as the van crept down the street. It stopped 2 houses away. 4 men got out, all wearing black faces covered. They moved professionally, checking for cameras staying in the shadows. Let them come, Marcus whispered. The crew approached the house. One pulled out a device, probably a camera jammer. Another had a crowbar. They were going for the back door. Marcus and Jake moved silently through the house, positioning themselves. The lock clicked. The door opened slowly. The first man entered, then the second. "Now," Marcus said. The lights blazed on. Marcus and Jake moved simultaneously, 15 years of muscle memory taking over. The first intruder went down before he knew what hit him, Jake's arm around his throat in a sleeper hold. Marcus tackled the second, zip-tying his hands before the man could react. The other two tried to run, but Rodriguez and Mitchell were waiting. The takedown was swift, professional, and utterly one-sided. "Clear," Mitchell's voice came through the earpiece. They had all four secured on the living room floor. When the police arrived, Morales had been waiting nearby with a tactical unit. "Nice work," she said, surveying the scene. "Clean, professional." One of the intruders, his mask pulled off to reveal a scarred face, and prison tattoos glared at Marcus. "You have no idea who you're messing with." "Derek Thornton," Marcus said calmly. "Ex-Marine, dishonorable discharge for theft. Now he runs private security as a front for criminal operations. You're going to flip on him, or you're going down for breaking and entering conspiracy and whatever else the DA can think of." The man's eyes widened. How did Marcus know so much Cooper had been busy, very busy? As the police took the intruders away, Marcus's phone rang. It was Margaret. "You think you've won?" Her voice was slurred, drunk, or medication, maybe both. "You destroyed my life." "You destroyed your own life, Margaret. It's over." No, it's not. If I'm going down, I'm taking everyone with me." The line went dead. Jake looked at Marcus. That sounded like a threat. Before Marcus could respond, they heard sirens. Lots of sirens. Cooper's laptop started pinging with alerts. "Fire," he said. "The community center. It's on fire." They raced to the scene. The community center where the HOA meetings were held, where neighborhood events happened, was fully engulfed in flames. Fire crews were already battling the blaze, but it was clear the building was lost. In the crowd of onlookers, Marcus spotted Margaret. She was standing perfectly still, watching the flames with a small smile on her face. Sergeant Morales saw her too. She approached carefully, hand on her weapon. "Margaret Thornton, you're under arrest for arson." Margaret didn't resist. As Morales cuffed her, she looked at Marcus. "You took everything from me. My position, my reputation, my family. Now I've taken something from the neighborhood. We're even." "No," Marcus said quietly. "We're not even, because we'll rebuild. The community will come together and rebuild, but you'll be in prison." Margaret's smile faltered. For the first time, she looked afraid. As they led her away, Frank Thornton appeared. He looked older, broken. "I'm sorry," he said to Marcus. "I should have stopped her years ago." "You tried," Marcus said. "Sometimes people are too broken to save." Emma was there too, crying as she watched her mother being put into the police car. Marcus walked over to her. "This isn't your fault," he said. "I know, but she's still my mother. Despite everything, I still love her." "That's what makes you different from her. You can still love." The fire was controlled by dawn, but the community center was gone. As the sun rose over the charred remains, the neighborhood gathered. Instead of despair, Marcus saw determination. "We'll rebuild," Tom Henderson announced. "Better than before. A real community center, not Margaret's throne room." Linda Chang had set up a folding table with coffee and donuts. "The insurance will cover most of it, and I've already started a fundraising page." Mrs. Chen was taking photos, documenting everything. "My nephew's article is going to be front page tomorrow. Veteran exposes HOA corruption stops criminal ring. You're going to be famous, Marcus." Marcus didn't want fame. He wanted peace. But looking around at his neighbors, veterans and civilians, young and old, all united in purpose, he realized he'd found something better than peace. He'd found home. Jake clapped him on the shoulder. "Not bad for your first suburban operation." "Not done yet," Marcus said. "We still have to rebuild." "We," Jake grinned. "You said we." Marcus realized he had. Without meaning to, he'd become part of this community. After 15 years of temporary bases and constant movement, he'd finally found where he belonged. Rachel appeared with her laptop and a huge smile. "The FBI just called. Based on our evidence, they're launching a full investigation into the Thornton network. Derek's already been arrested. They're freezing all assets. What about the stolen HOA funds? Tom asked. We'll recover most of it, plus penalties and interest. The HOA will be better funded than ever. As the crowd discussed rebuilding plans, Marcus noticed Robert Pierce standing alone at the edge. He walked over. Robert. I should have stood up to her years ago, Robert said. I was a coward. You stood up when it counted. Did I just jump ship when I saw which way the wind was blowing? Marcus thought about it. Does it matter? You did the right thing in the end. Robert nodded slowly. I want to help rebuild, really help, not just follow orders. We could use someone who knows the HOA inside and out. They shook hands, another small healing in a neighborhood that had been divided for too long. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity 3 weeks later. Every seat filled people standing along the walls, news cameras positioned strategically to capture what the media had dubbed the HOA trial of the century. Marcus sat in the witness box, his dress uniform immaculate, every ribbon precisely placed. Across from him, Margaret Thornton sat at the defendant's table, her orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the power suit she'd once worn like armor. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Janet Chen. No relation to Mrs. Chen from the neighborhood, was a former JAG officer who'd specifically requested this case. She approached Marcus with the kind of confidence that came from having an airtight case and a witness who knew how to testify. Master Sergeant Sullivan, she began, can you tell the court about the events of August 15th? Marcus spoke clearly, calmly, relating the vandalism, the threats, the attempted break-in. He'd testified in military tribunals before. This was familiar territory, just a different battlefield. Margaret's lawyer, a high-priced defense attorney named Richard Blackwood, who'd taken the case for the publicity, tried to paint Marcus as the aggressor during cross-examination. Isn't it true, Sergeant Sullivan, that you deliberately provoked my client by wearing military attire after being asked not to? Marcus met his gaze steadily. I wore the same clothes I'd worn throughout 5 combat deployments. If that provoked your client, perhaps she should examine why the sight of an American military uniform triggered such hostility. You organized a group of veterans to intimidate her. Objection. Ada Chen interrupted. Counsel is testifying. Sustained, Judge Patricia Morrison said. She was a no-nonsense jurist who'd made it clear from day one that she wouldn't tolerate theatrics. Blackwood regrouped. Did you or did you not organize multiple veterans to attend the HOA meeting? Veterans from the neighborhood attended of their own accord, Marcus replied. We don't need to be organized to support each other. It's what we do. The lawyer tried several more angles, but Marcus remained unshakable. 15 years of hostile interrogations in foreign countries had prepared him for far worse than a defense attorney's questions. Then came the moment that would be replayed on every news channel. Blackwood, frustrated by his inability to rattle Marcus, made a critical error. Sergeant Sullivan, isn't it possible that your military service has made you paranoid, seeing enemies where there are none, perhaps misinterpreting my client's legitimate concerns as attacks? The courtroom went silent. Even Margaret looked uncomfortable. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Counselor, I've served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and places I can't name. I've been shot 3 times, blown up twice, and watched friends die in my arms. If that service has made me anything, it's made me very good at identifying real threats versus petty tyrants. Your client is the latter. Someone in the gallery started clapping. Judge Morrison gavelled for order, but Marcus caught her suppressing a smile. The real fireworks came when Emma Thornton took the stand. Margaret hadn't seen her daughter since the arrest, and the look of betrayal on her face when Emma was sworn in was painful to witness. Miss Thornton, ADA. Chen began gently. What was your relationship with your brother Daniel? Emma's voice was steady, though tears tracked down her cheeks. Danny was my best friend. When he enlisted, I was so proud. He wanted to serve to be part of something bigger than himself. And when he returned from deployment, he was different, struggling. He had nightmares, anxiety, but he was getting help working through it. Until what? Emma looked directly at her mother. Until Mom made it impossible. She called him weak, said real soldiers don't need therapy. She wouldn't let him in the house if he wore anything military-related. She was ashamed of him. Margaret stood up. That's not true. I was trying to help him move on. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Miss Thornton, you will remain seated and silent, or you will be removed from the courtroom. Margaret sat, but her face was twisted with rage. Emma continued, her voice stronger. The day Danny died, he'd come to the house to try one more time to reconcile. Mom wouldn't even open the door. She called him a broken soldier through the intercom. Those were the last words she ever said to him. The courtroom was dead silent, except for muffled sobs from several spectators. After his death, Emma said, Mom rewrote history. Suddenly, Danny was a victim of the military, not her rejection. She turned her guilt into hatred for anyone who reminded her of what she'd done. That's why she targeted veterans in the neighborhood. They were surrogates for Danny, and punishing them was easier than facing her own culpability. Blackwood tried to cross-examine, but Emma was unshakable. She'd brought Danny's journal, his letters home, even recordings of voicemails he'd left trying to reach out to his mother. Each piece of evidence painted a picture of a young soldier abandoned by the person who should have supported him most. Rachel testified next about the financial crimes, presenting her forensic analysis with the precision of a guided missile. Charts, graphs, bank records she'd constructed, an unassailable case of embezzlement spanning nearly a decade. The total stolen funds amount to approximately $2.3 million, Rachel stated. This includes direct embezzlement, inflated contracts to shell companies, and kickbacks from vendors. Can you explain the mechanism? ADA Chen asked. Rachel pulled up a flowchart on the courtroom screen. Miss Thornton would create a fake vendor company, usually registered in Delaware, for anonymity. The HOA would approve contracts to these companies for services that were either never performed or grossly overpriced. The money would flow through multiple accounts before ending up in Miss Thornton's personal holdings. And the residents who were targeted, always minorities or veterans. The fines collected from them specifically went into what Miss Thornton called the discretionary fund, which she used for personal expenses. She bought a BMW with money collected from fining the Washingtons for their excessive patriotic display. The gallery erupted in angry murmurs. Judge Morrison had to gavel several times for order. Linda Chang's testimony with the recorded conversations was devastating. Margaret's own voice filled the courtroom, speaking about cleaning out the undesirables and making their lives hell until they leave. One recording in particular stood out, Margaret laughing about Jim Martinez's dog dying after she had it poisoned. She thought it was funny, Linda said, visibly shaking. She said, one less barking problem in the neighborhood. Jim Martinez was in the gallery. The Gulf War veteran, normally stoic, had tears streaming down his face. That dog had been his service animal, helping him manage his PTSD. Derek Thornton had already pled guilty in exchange for testimony against his sister. He took the stand in shackles, his fall from successful businessman to convicted felon complete. Margaret ran everything, he said, not meeting his sister's eyes. She decided who to target, how much to steal, which contracts I'd get. I just followed her lead. Why? Ada Chen asked. Because she had dirt on everyone. She knew about my discharge from the Marines, my tax evasion, my other activities. She kept files on everyone, leverage for when she needed it. This revelation sent another shock through the courtroom. Margaret hadn't just been corrupt, she'd been running what amounted to a suburban intelligence operation, gathering blackmail material on residents. Sergeant Morales testified about the arrest, the arson, the conspiracy to commit assault. The evidence was overwhelming: security footage, witness statements, the testimony of the hired thugs who'd all flipped on Margaret to save themselves. In 20 years of law enforcement, Morales said, I've never seen someone abuse a position of petty authority so thoroughly. This wasn't just corruption, it was a reign of terror disguised as community management. The defense's case was weak. Blackwood called character witnesses, but most refused to testify once they learned the full scope of Margaret's crimes. He tried to argue mental illness, bringing in a psychiatrist who diagnosed Margaret with narcissistic personality disorder, exacerbated by complicated grief. Miss Thornton's actions, while wrong, stem from unprocessed trauma related to her son's death, the psychiatrist testified. But the prosecution's expert witness, a forensic psychiatrist who'd examined Margaret, disagreed. While Miss Thornton certainly has personality disorders and unresolved grief, she clearly knew right from wrong. Her elaborate schemes to hide her crimes, her targeting of specific vulnerable populations, her ability to maintain a public facade, these all indicate someone fully aware of and responsible for their actions. On the third day of the trial, something unexpected happened. Frank Thornton asked to testify. He hadn't been on either witness list, but Judge Morrison allowed it. Frank looked haggard, aged 10 years and 3 weeks. But his voice was clear as he spoke. "I failed my family," he began. "I saw what Margaret was becoming after Danny died, and I did nothing. I left instead of fighting for her to get help. Maybe if I'd tried harder." He looked at Margaret, who refused to meet his eyes. "But I also know that Margaret made choices. Evil choices. She turned our son's death into a weapon against innocent people. She perverted his memory, used his service as an excuse for her crimes. Danny would be horrified by what she's done in his name." Frank pulled out a photo of Danny in his army dress uniform, smiling proud. "This is who our son was. A hero who struggled, yes, but a hero nonetheless. What Margaret did to his memory is almost worse than her financial crimes. She turned him into a justification for hatred." Margaret finally broke. "You don't understand," she screamed. "None of you understand. They took my baby and sent back a stranger. The military destroyed him." "No, Margaret," Frank said quietly. "You destroyed him, and then you destroyed yourself." Margaret collapsed, sobbing hysterically. Court was recessed while medical staff attended to her. When testimony resumed, Marcus was recalled for redirect. ADA Chen had one final question. "Sergeant Sullivan, what impact has this ordeal had on you and your community?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. "It's brought us together. For years, Miss Thornton ruled through fear and division. Now, neighbors who barely spoke are friends. Veterans who felt isolated have support. The community she tried to destroy has become stronger than ever. And personally, I came home from war expecting peace. I found a different kind of battle, one that in some ways was harder because the enemy looked like a neighbor, not a combatant. But fighting for my community, standing up for what's right, it reminded me why I served in the first place. To protect American values, whether from foreign threats or domestic tyranny." Closing arguments were brutal. ADA Chen methodically laid out the evidence: financial fraud, extortion, assault, conspiracy, arson. She painted Margaret as a corrupt tyrant who'd perverted a position of trust for personal gain and vendetta. Blackwood did his best, arguing for mercy, citing Margaret's grief, her mental health issues, the loss of her son. But even he seemed to know it was hopeless. The jury deliberated for exactly 93 minutes. When they filed back in, not one would look at Margaret. "On the count of embezzlement in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of extortion, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit assault, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of arson in the second degree, we find the defendant guilty." The guilty verdicts kept coming, 27 counts in total. Margaret was convicted on all of them. She didn't react, just sat there, staring at nothing as her life effectively ended. Judge Morrison set sentencing for the following week, but everyone knew Margaret would be going away for a long time. California's 3 strikes law, combined with the federal charges still pending, meant she'd likely die in prison. As court was dismissed, Marcus found himself surrounded by neighbors, all wanting to shake his hand. Thank him. But he pushed through to where Emma stood alone crying. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be. She did this to herself. I wish it could have been different." "We all do." Frank joined them, putting his arm around his daughter. "Danny would be proud of you," he told Emma. "You did the right thing. It doesn't feel right. It feels like betrayal." Marcus understood that feeling. Sometimes doing the right thing feels wrong. That's how you know it matters. Outside the courthouse, the media was in a frenzy. Cameras, microphones, reporters shouting questions. Jake and the team formed a protective cordon around Marcus, getting him through the crowd. "Sergeant Sullivan, how does it feel to have won?" Marcus stopped, turned to the cameras. "Nobody won here. A woman's life is destroyed, a community was terrorized for years, and a young soldier's memory was dishonored. There are no winners, only justice. What's next for Willowbrook Estates? We rebuild. We heal. We make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Back in the neighborhood, there was no celebration. Instead, there was a somber recognition that a dark chapter had closed. The community center's ruins had been cleared and already plans for a new building were underway. Tom Henderson had been elected the new HOA president in a landslide with Linda Chang as treasurer and surprisingly Robert Pierce as secretary. He'd committed to transparency and had actually followed through. First order of business, Tom announced at the first post-Margaret HOA meeting, is dissolving every discriminatory rule she put in place. Dress codes, flag restrictions, all of it. Gone. The meeting was standing room only, but the atmosphere was different. Hope instead of fear, participation instead of dictation. Second, full financial transparency. Every dollar and every dollar out will be posted online for all residents to see. Applause filled the room. Third, and this is personal for me, we're establishing a veteran support fund. Part of our recovered money will go toward helping military families in the neighborhood with whatever they need. Marcus stood up. I'd like to propose something else. The new community center should have a memorial wall for all veterans from our neighborhood, including Daniel Thornton. He deserves to be remembered for his service, not his mother's actions. The vote was unanimous. A week later at Margaret's sentencing, the courtroom was again packed. Judge Morrison had reviewed all the evidence, the victim impact statements, the psychiatric reports. Miss Thornton, she began in 30 years on the bench. I've rarely seen such a systematic abuse of power. You took a position meant to serve a community and turned it into a personal fiefdom. You targeted those who served our country, adding insult to their injuries. You stole not just money, but peace of mind, security, and community cohesion. Margaret stood silent, defeated. However, the court also recognizes the tragic circumstances that contributed to your actions. The loss of a child is unimaginable, and clearly you never received appropriate help for your grief. For a moment it seemed like the judge might show leniency, but grief does not excuse evil. Mental illness does not justify targeting the vulnerable. Personal tragedy does not permit you to create tragedy for others. Judge Morrison's voice hardened. Therefore, on the 27 state counts, I sentence you to 45 years in state prison. The federal charges will be addressed separately, but I recommend they run concurrently. 45 years. At Margaret's age, it was a life sentence. As the bailiffs led Margaret away, she turned one last time. Her eyes found Marcus, and for just a moment he saw not the tyrant, but the broken mother who'd lost her way so completely she'd destroyed everything around her. I'm sorry, she mouthed silently. Marcus nodded. He couldn't forgive her, that wasn't his right, but he could acknowledge her humanity even now. Outside the courthouse, Emma and Frank were waiting. They decided to move, unable to stay in a neighborhood so haunted by their family's actions, but they wanted to say goodbye. Thank you, Frank said, shaking Marcus's hand. For everything, for standing up to her, but also for remembering Danny properly. He was a brother veteran, Marcus said simply. That means something. Emma hugged him, surprising them both. Take care of the neighborhood, she whispered. As they drove away, Marcus felt a chapter closing. But unlike after his military service, this ending felt right, complete. That evening, the neighborhood held a barbecue in Tom Henderson's backyard. It was supposed to be small, but word spread, and soon the entire street was there. Veterans and civilians, young and old, all mingling without the artificial divisions Margaret had created. Cooper had set up a projection system displaying photos from the trial, the rebuilding efforts, the community coming together. Someone had even found old photos of the neighborhood from before Margaret's reign, showing block parties and gatherings that had stopped under her rule. You know what's funny? Rodriguez said, nursing a beer. We spent all those years fighting for freedom overseas, and we come home to find we needed to fight for it here too. Different enemy, same war, Mitchell agreed in his taciturn way. Jake raised his bottle. To Marcus Sullivan, who reminded us that the mission doesn't end when you take off the uniform. To all of us, Marcus corrected. Every neighbor who stood up, spoke out, refused to be intimidated. This wasn't a one-man operation. Mrs. Chen had made enough food to feed an army, which was good, because that's essentially what they had. Jim Martinez had brought his new service dog, a golden retriever named Liberty, who was already beloved by the neighborhood kids. Bill Patterson was telling war stories to a group of teenagers who hung on every word. Rachel pulled Marcus aside. The FBI called. Derek flipped completely. He's giving them everything: names, dates, amounts. The entire Thornton network is coming down. Good.
Pêchement, c'est...
Also, that job offer I mentioned, the forensic accounting firm, they want to bring you on as a security consultant. Seems your military experience combined with what you did here makes you uniquely qualified to spot and stop corporate corruption. Marcus considered it. For months he'd been drifting purposeless. Now suddenly possibilities were opening up. I'll think about it. Rachel smiled. You know, for someone who just wanted to be left alone to wear his camo pants, you've certainly made an impact. Sometimes you don't choose the mission, Marcus said. Sometimes it chooses you. As the evening wore on, stories emerged from neighbors about their own experiences with Margaret, the elderly couple she'd fined for their grandchildren's chalk drawings, the single mother she'd harassed about her work vehicle, the immigrant family she'd tried to force out with constantly changing violations. Each story added another layer to the picture of Margaret's tyranny, but also to the community's resilience. They'd all survived, and now they were thriving. You know what we should do, Linda Chang said suddenly? Create a neighborhood constitution, written rules about what the HOA can and cannot do, requiring supermajority votes for any restrictions, term limits for board members. Checks and balances, Judge Harrison agreed. She'd come to the barbecue straight from court, still in her robes. No more dictatorships. Tom pulled out a legal pad. Let's start drafting it right now. As neighbors gathered around contributing ideas, Marcus stepped back to watch. This was democracy in action, messy and loud and beautiful. This was what he'd fought for all those years overseas, not just the abstract concept of freedom, but the actual practice of it. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Marcus tensed, remembering the anonymous threats from before. But when he opened it, he saw Sergeant Sullivan. This is Colonel Mitchell. Heard about your situation through the veteran network. Outstanding work. If you ever want to return to service, we could use someone like you training others in civil affairs. The military needs leaders who understand that not all battles are fought with weapons. Let me know. Colonel James Mitchell, U.S. Army Civil Affairs Command. Marcus stared at the message. A chance to return to service, but in a different capacity. Teaching training, preparing soldiers for the complex realities of modern conflict where enemies might look like neighbors and victories might mean building communities rather than destroying targets. Everything okay? Jake asked, noticing Marcus's expression. Marcus showed him the text. Jake whistled. Civil affairs? That's perfect for you. I don't know. I just got settled here. Who says you have to choose reserve position train 1 weekend a month, deploy occasionally for training missions? Best of both worlds. Marcus looked around at his neighbors, his community, his home. Then he thought about all the young soldiers who'd face situations like this, who'd need to know that service didn't end with discharge, that sometimes the hardest battles were fought in your own backyard. Maybe, he said. As the party wound down, Marcus helped clean up. It was such a normal suburban activity, but it felt profound somehow. This was his life now, not just existing in Willowbrook Estates, but being part of it. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. You know, when you first moved in, I thought you'd be one of those guys who kept to himself, never engaged with the neighborhood. That was the plan, Marcus admitted. Plans change. Thank God for that. Tom looked around at the neighbors, still lingering, reluctant to end this moment of unity. You gave us our neighborhood back, Marcus. We took it back together. Maybe. But you showed us how. You reminded us that standing up to bullies isn't just for soldiers. It's for all of us. As Marcus walked home, Jake beside him, he thought about the journey from that first morning when Margaret knocked on his door to now. It had been only a month, but it felt like a lifetime. You good? Jake asked. Marcus considered the question. He thought about his PTSD still there, but manageable. About the purpose he'd found in protecting his community. About the future stretching ahead full of possibilities instead of emptiness. Yeah, he said, meaning it for the first time in a long time. I'm good. 6 months after Margaret Thornton's conviction, Willowbrook Estates had transformed into something unrecognizable from the fear-ruled subdivision it had once been. The morning sun cast long shadows across freshly painted houses. American flags flew freely from porches, and the sound of construction echoed from the site of the new community center. Marcus Sullivan stood at the construction site reviewing blueprints with the project foreman while wearing his usual camouflage cargo pants and a t-shirt from the veterans' charity run they'd held last month. "The memorial wall will go here," the foreman, a Vietnam vet named Carl, pointed to the entrance area. "We've already got 73 names for it. 73 veterans from Willowbrook Estates, past and present. Daniel Thornton's name would be among them at Emma's request. She'd sent the inscription from her new home in Oregon. Specialist Daniel Thornton, U.S. Army, 2015 to 2019, beloved son, brother, and warrior. Make sure Danny's name is at eye level," Marcus said, "where kids can read it easily." "You got it, Sarge, Vo." The new community center was being built with recovered HOA funds, insurance money from the arson, and donations that had poured in after the story went national. It would be twice the size of the old one, with a veterans resource office, a youth program space, and a meeting hall that could hold the entire neighborhood. Marcus's phone rang. "Colonel Mitchell. Sullivan, how's the civilian world treating you?" "Can't complain, sir, though I'm not entirely civilian anymore." Marcus had accepted the reserve position with civil affairs teaching 1 weekend a month at Fort Bragg. His course, Navigating Civilian Conflicts When the Enemy Looks Like Your Neighbor, had become mandatory for all civil affairs officers. "That's actually why I'm calling. We've got a situation in Portland, veteran being harassed by his condo association, similar to what you experienced. Local reserve unit requested you specifically as an advisor." "When?" "Next week if you can manage it." Marcus looked at the construction site, the neighborhood that had become his mission. "Send me the details. I'll make it work." After hanging up, he walked to the temporary HOA office, a trailer set up near the construction site. Inside, Tom Henderson was deep in conversation with the new board members, including Linda Chang and surprisingly Robert Pierce, who had become one of the most dedicated members after his redemption arc. "Morning, Marcus," Tom called out. "We were just discussing the Memorial Day plans." Memorial Day was 2 weeks away, and for the first time in a decade, Willowbrook Estates was planning a proper celebration, parade barbecue, and the dedication of the new community center. "Jake confirmed he's bringing his whole team," Marcus said. "Rodriguez is flying in from Texas Cooper from his new tech job in Seattle. Even Mitchell is coming." "The FBI guy wants to attend too," Linda added. "Agent Harrison. He said the Thornton case has become required reading at Quantico for public corruption investigations." Robert cleared his throat. "There's something else. Margaret wants to send a letter to be read at the dedication." The room went silent. "From prison?" Tom asked. Robert nodded. "Through her lawyer. It's apparently an apology. To the neighborhood, to the veterans, to everyone." "Absolutely not," Linda said immediately. "She doesn't get to make our day about her." Marcus thought about it. Margaret was serving her 45 years, had lost everything. Her brother Derek was in federal prison. The entire Thornton criminal network had been dismantled. Was there room for forgiveness? "What does Frank think?" Marcus asked. "He's conflicted. Emma says absolutely not, but Frank thinks maybe it could help with closure." "Let's table it," Tom decided. "We've got bigger things to focus on." As Marcus left the trailer, he found Mrs. Chen waiting for him with a younger woman he didn't recognize. "Marcus, this is my niece Jennifer, the journalist." Jennifer Chen extended her hand. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm writing a book about the Willowbrook uprising. I was hoping we could talk." "Uprising seems dramatic," Marcus said. "Does it?" A decorated veteran returns home, faces discrimination from a corrupt HOA president, rallies. His community exposes massive fraud and transforms a neighborhood from a dictatorship to a democracy. That's not dramatic enough. Marcus smiled despite himself. "When you put it that way." They walked through the neighborhood as Jennifer asked questions, her recorder running. Children played in yards that had once been kept pristine and empty. A group of veterans met for coffee on Jim Martinez's porch, his service dog Liberty lounging in the sun. The Washingtons had moved back their house, proudly displaying an American flag and a Black Lives Matter sign side by side, something that would have earned massive fines under Margaret's regime. What's the biggest change? Jennifer asked. Marcus considered. Trust. People trust each other now. Under Margaret, everyone was afraid their neighbor might report them. Now we look out for each other. They passed the site where Marcus's garage had been vandalized. The house now had security cameras, but more importantly, neighbors who watched out for him. Do you ever hear from Margaret? Jennifer asked. No, her lawyer reached out once about the letter, but that's it. Do you hate her? Marcus stopped walking. No, I pity her. She let grief turn into poison, and that poison destroyed everything she touched. But hate's too heavy to carry. I've carried enough heavy things. That afternoon, Rachel arrived with boxes of documents. The forensic audit was complete, and she was helping distribute restitution checks to neighbors who'd been illegally fined. Final tally, she announced to the gathered crowd. We recovered $1.8 million. After legal fees and the community center construction, every affected family is getting their fines back plus interest. Jim Martinez received the largest check, $23,000 for 5 years of harassment and illegal fines. He stared at it with tears in his eyes. This isn't just money, he said. It's validation, proof that what she did was wrong. What are you going to do with it? Someone asked. Training another service dog, Jim said immediately. For another vet who needs one. Liberty saved my life. Maybe I can help save someone else's. The crowd applauded. This was what Margaret had never understood. Community wasn't about control, but about lifting each other up. That evening, Marcus had dinner with Jake, who'd driven down for the weekend. They sat on the porch watching the neighborhood kids play street hockey, another activity Margaret had banned. You've built something good here, Jake said. We all did. No, brother, this was you. You could have just kept your head down, changed your clothes, avoided the fight, but you didn't. She didn't give me much choice. There's always a choice. You chose to fight, and because you did, this whole neighborhood is free. Marcus's phone buzzed. Emma Thornton was calling. Emma. Marcus, I need to tell you something. Mom's sick. Cancer. The prison doctors say maybe 6 months. Marcus felt the news hit him unexpectedly hard. After everything, Margaret was still a human being, still someone's mother. I'm sorry, Emma. She wants to see you. I know that's insane to ask, but I'll think about it. After hanging up, Marcus told Jake about the call. You're not actually considering it, Jake said. She's dying. So, she tried to destroy you. She burned down the community center. She poisoned Jim's dog for Christ's sake. And she's dying alone in prison, hated by everyone, including her own daughter. Jake shook his head. You're too good for this world, Marcus. 3 days later, Marcus drove to the California Institution for Women in Corona. He told no one except Rachel, who'd tried to talk him out of it, but ultimately supported his decision. The prison was a stark contrast to Willowbrook's manicured streets, concrete wire towers. Marcus had seen enough prisons in Iraq and Afghanistan to recognize the universal architecture of incarceration. Margaret was brought to the visiting room in a wheelchair, an IV attached to her arm. The powerful woman who'd terrorized a neighborhood was now frail, her hair gone gray, her face gaunt. The cancer had ravaged her in just 6 months. You came, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma asked me to. Emma hasn't visited since the trial. They sat in silence for a moment. Marcus didn't know what to say to this broken woman who'd caused so much pain. I know you hate me, Margaret finally said. I don't hate you. She looked surprised. You should. Probably, but hate's exhausting, and I'm tired of being exhausted. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I destroyed everything, my family, my community, my life. And for what? Because I couldn't face what I did to Danny. What did happen with Danny? Marcus asked gently. Margaret was quiet for so long, Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. Then in a broken voice, she told the story. When he came back from deployment, he was different, jumpy, angry, scared. He'd wake up screaming. I thought if he just tried harder, if he was stronger, he'd get over it. That's what my father did after Korea. No therapy, no medication, just bourbon and silence. She wiped her eyes with a shaking hand. Danny begged me to understand. He tried to explain PTSD, but I wouldn't listen. Called him weak, said he was embarrassing the family. The last day. God, the last day he came to the house in his uniform. Said he was getting help, getting better, wanted to reconcile. I wouldn't even open the door, told him to come back when he was normal again. Margaret broke down sobbing. 3 hours later, the police called. He'd driven to the beach, the one where I used to take him and Emma as kids, walked into the ocean and didn't stop. Marcus sat with her grief, offering no platitudes or absolution, just presence. After that, Margaret continued, I couldn't face what I'd done. So I blamed everyone else. The military for breaking him, the veterans in the neighborhood for reminding me of him, you for being everything I should have let Danny be. Danny made his choice, Marcus said carefully. PTSD is a beast, but suicide is a choice. You didn't pull him into that ocean.
Didn't I?
My rejection, my cruelty. Your mistakes, Marcus corrected. Terrible mistakes, but mistakes. What you did after targeting veterans, the stealing, the vendetta, those were choices. Evil choices. Margaret nodded. I know. I became a monster. The thing is, I knew it while I was doing it. Some part of me was screaming to stop, but the anger felt better than the grief. It always does until it doesn't. They sat quietly again. Around them, other inmates visited with family, the low murmur of conversation, and occasional laughter, a strange counterpoint to their heavy discussion. Why did you really come? Margaret asked. Marcus thought about it. Closure, maybe. Or because I've seen what happens when you can't forgive. It eats you alive from the inside. I've watched too many brothers destroyed not by bullets, but by the hatred they carried home. Can you forgive me? I'm working on it. Not for you, for me. But Margaret, the people you hurt, Jim, the Washingtons, all the others, they may never forgive you, and that's their right. I know. The letter I wanted to send for Memorial Day, I wanted to apologize. A letter won't fix what you broke. Then what will? Marcus stood to leave. Nothing. Some things can't be fixed, only learned from. The neighborhood is moved on, grown stronger. Your legacy isn't the pain you caused, but the unity that came from standing against you. As the guard prepared to take Margaret back, she called out, Marcus, will you put Danny's name on the memorial wall? It's already there, eye level where kids can read it. Margaret broke down again as they wheeled her away. Driving home, Marcus felt lighter somehow. Not forgiving exactly, but understanding. Margaret was a cautionary tale about what happened when grief curdled into hatred, when power corrupted absolutely, when fear ruled over love. Back in Willowbrook, preparations for Memorial Day were in full swing. Banners stretched across streets, volunteers prepared food. The high school band practiced patriotic songs. The new community center was nearly complete, its modern design a stark contrast to the utilitarian box Margaret had ruled from. The night before Memorial Day, the original team gathered at Marcus's house, Jake Rodriguez, Cooper Mitchell, plus Tom, Linda, Robert, and others who'd stood against Margaret. Rachel had prepared what she called victory dinner, though Marcus insisted on calling it community dinner. Tomorrow's going to be huge, Tom said. The mayor's coming news crews, probably 500 people. Margaret's dying, Marcus said quietly, deciding they should know. Cancer. Maybe 6 months. The room went silent. Good, someone said, then immediately looked ashamed. It's okay to have complicated feelings, Marcus said. She hurt a lot of people. Does Emma know? Linda asked. She told me. Frank Thornton arrived late, looking exhausted. He'd been traveling trying to distance himself from the family shame, but had returned for the memorial dedication. I heard you visited Margaret, he said to Marcus. Emma asked me to. Frank nodded. Thank you. I can't face her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That's okay too. As the evening wore on, stories were shared not about Margaret, but about the future. Tom outlined plans for neighborhood improvements funded by the recovered money. Linda discussed the new transparency measures that would prevent future corruption. Robert, in his redemption arc, had created a neighborhood watch that actually watched out for neighbors rather than policing them. You know what's amazing, Cooper said, slightly drunk on Jake's lethal punch? We turned a suburban HOA dispute into a revolution. This should be taught at West Point. It is, Marcus said. It's part of my civil affairs curriculum now.
The Battle of Willowbrook Estates, Asymmetric Warfare in Suburban America. Everyone laughed, but there was truth in it. They'd fought a war, just not with weapons. Memorial Day dawned clear and bright. By 9 a.m., the streets were packed. The parade started at the old community center's ruins, now a temporary memorial garden, and wound through the neighborhood to the new building. Marcus wore his dress uniform, marching with 47 other veterans from the neighborhood. Behind them came active duty service members from the local base, then first responders, then what seemed like the entire community. Emma Thornton stood in the crowd, having driven down from Oregon. Marcus saw her and nodded. She'd chosen to honor her brother rather than hide from her mother's shame. The new community center gleamed in the morning sun. The memorial wall was covered by a curtain waiting to be unveiled. Mayor Patricia Williams herself, a Navy veteran, spoke about redemption, community, and the price of freedom both abroad and at home. Then it was Marcus's turn to speak. He hadn't prepared remarks, preferring to speak from the heart. 6 months ago, I just wanted to be left alone to wear my camo pants in peace. He began, getting a laugh. I never expected to find myself in another battle, especially not in suburban California. But that's the thing about fighting for freedom, the battlefield can be anywhere. He looked out at the crowd, seeing faces that had become familiar neighbors who'd become friends. Margaret Thornton ruled through fear for 8 years. She divided us, controlled us, made us suspicious of each other. But when we stood together, when we refused to be intimidated, we discovered something were stronger than any tyrant, foreign or domestic. Applause rippled through the crowd. Today we dedicate this building not to victory, but to vigilance. Democracy isn't a destination. It's a journey that requires constant attention. This community center stands as a reminder that freedom requires participation, that silence in the face of injustice is complicity, and that sometimes the greatest act of patriotism is standing up to corruption in your own backyard. He paused, seeing Emma crying in the crowd. The names on this wall represent service and sacrifice. Some died in combat, some came home and fought different battles. One name up there belongs to Specialist Daniel Thornton. He was failed by his family, by his community, by a system that didn't know how to help him. We honor him today not with empty thanks, but with a promise never again will a veteran in this neighborhood face their demons alone. The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus stepped back as Tom and Linda unveiled the memorial wall, 73 names in bronze with space for more. At the bottom, an inscription, "For those who served abroad and at home, your sacrifice built this community." The dedication ceremony continued with the high school band speeches from other officials and the official ribbon cutting. But the most powerful moment came when Jim Martinez approached with Liberty and a young veteran named Carlos, who'd just received his own service dog funded by Jim's restitution money. "This is what community looks like," Jim said to the crowd. "Not rules and fines, but neighbors helping neighbors." As the formal ceremony ended and the barbecue began, Marcus found himself standing with Jake at the memorial wall reading the names. "Danny Thornton's name really is at eye level," Jake observed. "Every kid who reads it will ask who he was, and someone will tell them a soldier who struggled, who deserved better, whose death taught us to do better." "You think Margaret knows?" I told her. Jake shook his head. "You're either a saint or an idiot." "Probably both." Cooper approached with his tablet. "The live stream has 500,000 viewers. #Willowbrook Uprising is trending. And get this, 3 other neighborhoods have started investigations into their HOAs based on our story." The revolution was spreading. As the day wore on, the party grew. Music filled the air, kids played games, veterans swapped stories with civilians who finally felt safe to engage. The Washingtons had set up a soul food booth, Mrs. Chen ran a dumpling stand, and Jake had somehow procured enough barbecue to feed an army. Robert Pierce, in his full redemption, had organized a voter registration drive. "If we learned anything from Margaret," he said, "it's that democracy requires participation." Linda Chang had set up a transparency booth showing real-time HOA finances on a large screen, every dollar in, every dollar out, visible to all. "Never again," she said when asked why such radical transparency was necessary. Around sunset, as the celebration began winding down, Frank Thornton approached Marcus.
I've decided to sell the house, he said. Too many memories. But before I go, I wanted to give you this. He handed Marcus a folded flag, Danny's burial flag. I can't accept this, Marcus said. Please. You honored him when his own mother wouldn't. It belongs with someone who understands what it means. Marcus took the flag reverently. I'll display it in the community center. Everyone will know Danny was one of us. Frank nodded, tears streaming down his face, and walked away. As darkness fell, the crowd gradually dispersed. The new community center was officially open, its lights blazing like a beacon. Marcus stood in the main hall looking at the photos already being hung, images from the trial, the rebuilding, today's celebration. Rachel appeared beside him. You did it. We did it. No, Marcus, this was you. Your courage started everything. Courage? Marcus laughed. I was just too stubborn to change my pants. That's what courage is, refusing to bend when you're right. Jake, Rodriguez, Cooper, and Mitchell joined them, the old squad reunited. So what's next? Rodriguez asked. This neighborhood's fixed. Where's the next mission? Marcus thought about the Portland situation. Colonel Mitchell had mentioned the other neighborhoods reaching out for help, the civil affairs training he was developing. The mission never ends, he said. It just evolves. Getting philosophical in your old age, Jake teased. Maybe. Or maybe I finally understand what we were really fighting for all those years. They stood together, 5 warriors who'd fought in foreign lands and come home to fight a different kind of battle. Behind them, the memorial wall gleamed in the light, 73 names bearing witness to service and sacrifice. Outside, Willowbrook Estates settled into sleep, a peaceful, free sleep that hadn't been possible under Margaret's reign. Children were safe to play, veterans were honored, not hunted, and neighbors looked out for each other instead of reporting violations. 3 weeks later, Marcus received a call from the prison. Margaret Thornton had died in her sleep. The cancer had moved faster than expected. Her last words, according to the nurse, were, "Tell them I'm sorry." The neighborhood's response was muted. Some felt relief, others sadness, most a complicated mix of emotions. They held no celebration, but neither did they mourn. Emma and Frank held a private service. Marcus attended along with Tom and Linda. It was small, quiet, appropriate for someone who'd isolated herself so thoroughly. At the graveside, Emma spoke. My mother lost her way after Danny died. She became something ugly, something cruel. But I choose to remember the mother who read us bedtime stories, who taught us to ride bikes, who loved us before grief broke her. That's the woman I'm burying today. Marcus understood. Everyone deserved to be remembered for their best moments, even if their worst moments defined them. A month later, Jennifer Chen's article was published in the LA Times, then picked up nationally. The Battle of Willowbrook, How One Veteran Defeated Suburban Tyranny, became required reading in sociology classes studying power dynamics and community organization. The new HOA under Tom's leadership passed the Willowbrook Charter, a constitution limiting HOA power and requiring transparency. It became a model for neighborhoods nationwide. Marcus's civil affairs course expanded. He traveled monthly teaching military personnel how to navigate civilian conflicts, how to recognize corruption, how to build communities rather than destroy them. But he always came home to Willowbrook Estates. His house, once a mere shelter, had become a home. The neighborhood, once a battlefield, had become a community. One evening, a year after Margaret's arrest, Marcus sat on his porch wearing his usual camo pants and watching the neighborhood kids play street hockey. Jake was visiting, Cooper had moved back permanently, and Rodriguez was considering buying the house Margaret had once lived in. Poetic justice, he called it. You ever regret getting involved? Jake asked. Marcus thought about the question. The fight had cost him time, energy, peace, but it had given him purpose, community, home. Never, he said. Tom Henderson walked by with his grandson, teaching him to ride a bike on the sidewalk Margaret had once patrolled for violations. Linda Chang was hosting a book club on her lawn, another former violation. The Washingtons were having a loud, joyful barbecue that would have earned multiple fines. This was freedom, not grand gestures or epic battles, but the simple right to live without fear in your own home. Marcus's phone buzzed. Another neighborhood requesting help with HOA corruption. Another mission. He smiled, stood stretched. Tomorrow, he'd answer the call, continue the fight, but tonight he was home surrounded by friends who'd become family, in a neighborhood that had become a symbol of resistance against petty tyranny. The ghost of Margaret Thornton had been exorcised, replaced by something stronger, a community that knew its power and would never again surrender it to fear. As the stars came out over Willowbrook Estates, Marcus Sullivan, warrior, veteran, neighbor, and accidental revolutionary, went inside to plan the next battle for freedom, one HOA at a time. The war never ended. It just came home. And sometimes that's exactly where it needed to be fought.